Back with our breaking news tonight. Trump's legal team today requesting 3 more days to respond to the DOJ's request for a protective order. Within the past hour, a D.C. judge denied Trump's request, keeping Monday's deadline for a response in place. That aside, as the Justice Department prepares for 2 historic trials of Donald Trump, House Democrats want Americans to have a front row seat to the former president's proceedings. As it stands now, cameras are not allowed in federal courtrooms. More than 36 lawmakers have signed a letter to the federal court system requesting the proceedings in Florida and Washington, D.C. be broadcast live. Their request reads in part, quote, if the public is to fully accept the outcome, it will be vitally important for it to witness as directly as possible how the trials are conducted, the strength of the evidence adduced, and the credibility of witnesses. It is not a stretch to say that watching Trump's trials will be of massive interest to the American people. Just take a look at how many people tuned into the January 6th committee hearings. More than 10 million Americans watched each hearing. That's according to Nielsen. Joining me now, Marcus Childress, a former investigator for the January 6th committee. Marcus, thanks so much. First, I need to get your reaction to the judge in D.C. denying the Trump team's request for more time to respond to the DOJ asking for a protective order.
Yeah, this is, I think, pretty par for the course. I can't think of a criminal case, where there wasn't a protective order in place. I think it's just part of the criminal process, and the defense is entitled to having evidence so that they can properly prepare for trial. And the government has an interest in making sure that that evidence doesn't just get freely released to the public. And that's one of the key differences between a criminal investigation versus a congressional, where, a lot of evidence does get out to the public during the course of an investigation.
Marcus, as I understand it, there are basically 2 pathways for allowing cameras in the courtroom, either for a judicial conference, which of course is run by Chief Justice Roberts, to vote for an amendment on Rule 53, or for Congress to pass a law. Does either path seem plausible to you?
Well, I wish I could look into the future and tell you. I'm not quite sure. Look, I know that the American public probably wants to see this trial. I know members want to see this trial. Transparency is one of the great aspects of a congressional investigation, is that there is some level of transparency. And I think it makes Americans feel comfortable with the evidence that's being collected and being presented. But look, I wish I knew just as much as you did whether either one of those were plausible, but I guess we'll see it play out soon.
So let me ask a question that you can answer, Marcus, which is, do you think it makes a difference, right? Like, the core argument is if people get to watch it for themselves, if they get to see the evidence presented for themselves, I think to some extent, if they get to see the way that he is treated, then it will build trust in the process itself. And I wonder, as someone who has already been through this to some extent, given that the 1-6 hearings were televised, whether or not you believe that to be true.
Look, I do think it is. I think it's true. If we look back at our January 6 hearings, I think it's the evidence that we put forth, the theories that we put forth, that has even made this indictment believable, right? It's not a surprise to the American public because of the way that we were able to publicly tell our story. So I think that's a fair statement, right? That there is some trust and transparency, but there also are court rules and we have to follow those rules. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Right. Whether or not the trial is televised, which, of course, is sort of this huge issue of the moment, the Justice Department is going to have to present a clear story to the jury. Again, as someone who has done this work and thought through these challenges, I think we got a glimpse of it with the indictment, right? The case that they are going to lay out, the story that they are going to lay out. What do you think you learned from your work doing that for the 1-6 committee that is applicable here?
Look, the main thing that jumped out to me from the indictment, from our hearings, and what I anticipate will be in the trial is that, as you just said, it is such a clear theme and theory. And that's what matters when you're presenting to a jury, right? We can talk about charges or factual nuances or First Amendment objections all we want, but it's that theme and theory that matters. And the special counsel laid it out. I mean, he said that, 1, President Donald Trump lost the 2020 presidential election, and 2, despite that, he was determined to remain in power. That's the case right there. That's where all the facts are going to flow through in these pretrial motions that we're going to be reading during jury selection, during opening statements, all the way through closing. And that's exactly what we presented during our January 6 hearings in our report. It's the same theme that President Trump lost the election, but he was determined to stay in power. And so I think we saw it play out during our summer hearings last summer. And I think we're going to see a very similar theme play out during the pretrial motions and during the trial as well.
Marcus, I've only got about 30 seconds left, but I do want to ask you why you think the special counsel decided not to bring one of the charges that the committee recommended, inciting an insurrection.
Look, I'll go back to my days as a prosecutor, and I think you always want to keep charges as clean as possible. I think a clean narrative and presenting a straightforward story without distractions is always best for a jury. And look, I don't know what evidence the special counsel has collected. I don't know what their analysis is, but I do know that this indictment reads relatively clean. And I think that a jury will be able to digest the narrative that the special counsel will put forth during trial.
Marcus Childress, thank you so much for your time, for bringing us your expertise.